Welcome. Today we're going to be talking with Doreen Schwegler, and she's going to be talking all about how your genetics can impact weight loss and health. So welcome, Doreen.
Hi, Maureen. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. When I was growing up, there was a lot of people talking about how, when you put on weight or people were bigger than other people, and you used to say, oh, you've just got big bones, or I've just got big bones.
Yes, I remember that.
How much is it that people have big bones, or that they're genetically more predispositioned to put on weight?
Well, there's definitely genes that can impact your body type. There's a test that I do in the clinic, and it very much goes on your waist and hip measurements. So someone that's very muscly will be heavier and so-called big boned. So yeah, and we used to do waist measurements, and that would be an indication. So some people are just more prone to storing fat, and some people are more prone to needing portion control, and others are more prone needing to have lower carbs or lower fat, or just a Mediterranean style diet and low inflammatory diet. So yes, that is linked to your genes, definitely.
Because I just also I've been really keenly watching the Olympics, and it really hit home to me. One of the beach volleyballers, they were talking about the outfits they were wearing, and she said, and I was so self-conscious, going back to competing, and I'd had a child, etc. And then she mentioned how she said all of us work really hard, but some of us just have higher body fat percentages, and these are elite athletes, and you wouldn't even think that it happened to elite athletes.
Yes, remember Freaky Friday, where she swaps body with her daughter and she eats chips, and she says, oh, I haven't been able to eat chips for such a long time. There's a lot of things that can impact your body type, and not only your genetics, but also stress levels and inflammation, and a whole lot of things that can impact your body type. But some people just are quite muscly, and some people eat nothing and they're still overweight, and other people eat McDonald's and muffins every day and don't have any issues. But sometimes they are actually under-muscled and over-fat, even though their actual body weight is okay.
Right. So it sounds like it's not just a simple base it on weight.
No, it's definitely not based on weight. Or even body mass index, which is weight divided by height squared. So you need to look at body composition, and that's where the more advanced tests like bioimpedance testing, where a currents run down inside of the body, a bit like the fat scales at the gym, but that just runs from one leg to the other. But if you measure your muscle and fat and quality of cells, it can tell a lot about whether you need to lose fat or put on muscle, or do both, or address inflammation and other things that can impact weight loss.
Great. And so if someone said to you, that they did want to look at these things, what's the first step for people?
So it's probably genetics is not something I jump into in the very first time I see somebody, but initially I'll do a very thorough case history and questionnaire, and look at their family history, their diet, their stressors, their sleep, medications, past health conditions. So it's a very thorough initial consult, and during that initial consult I'll probably do some, if they're physically face-to-face and it's not a Zoom consult, I'll do some in-house testing. So I'm a hematology scientist by background, so sometimes I look at their blood under the microscope, and oftentimes I'll do this bioimpedance test, which works out what's happening inside their body. And I had a young 40-year-old yesterday who was actually a health practitioner, and she was perfect weight, but she was under-muscled and over, her fat percentage was probably 0.4 kilos over. So she was actually a healthy weight, but she needed to put on muscle. And as you approach menopause, your body, you only need around 20% less calories, unfortunately. So learning that and getting her to do more resistance exercise and have protein shortly after those resistance trainings, like a pump class or Pilates or even yoga or weights or body weight, that will assist her to put on muscle while she's still got lots, relatively good hormone balance. So did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. So, so it sounds like it's about personalising it for yourself. We often just get stuff and go into the internet and go, oh, well, I need to just lose weight. And we choose ourselves without actually taking into account our genetics, our body makeup, and all of those things.
Exactly. Like, people sometimes come to me with like a bucket of different health products, and they're all good for different reasons, but sometimes it's worth investing in a professional's help to actually work out what they really need. Because look, I could literally take 15 or 20 products. I take as a baseline fish oils and a product with sulforaphane, which helps make my liver detox work better, because I do have that family history of not clearing estrogen effectively. I take something for my memory and concentration with some brain health stuff. I take turmeric because that's good for everything. It's anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and good for the liver, and a probiotic. So, but people can take that plus, you know, vitamin C and antioxidants and anti-aging and resveratrol, and certainly I take magnesium at night time. But, you know, you can literally go to justify spending probably get 50 products, and each of them would be justified. But when you go to a health practitioner, the other big thing in the initial consult is I look at your previous pathology results and things like vitamin D and iron stores and B12, and order extra tests like the inflammation marker test. And homocysteine is an important test that I do if there's any history of miscarriage, weight gain, stroke in the family, Alzheimer's, because if it's elevated, there can be a genetic problem with folic acid and B12 and B6 and B2 metabolism. It's called methylation or homocysteine metabolism. And if you've got elevated levels, that can be as much of a risk factor of heart disease and stroke as, say, having an elevated blood pressure or elevated cholesterol. So I look very much at pathology tests, and vitamin D is an important one doctors are now catching on to, and keeping that level a lot higher than the recommended. At the moment, they changed the reference range. It used to be over 75 was the ideal. Now it's over 50 in winter, but I think 75 is the minimum. And if you've had any autoimmune disorder or cancer or or any sort of low immune issue, you need to keep your vitamin D over 100. And in the genetic profile, there is at least 2 genes that impact vitamin D metabolism. And if you have those genes, you might be out in the sun all day as a gardener and not wear sunscreen and still have low vitamin D because you're not processing it as effectively. If you're overweight, you may not be processing it and you need higher doses of vitamin D. If you're dark-skinned, a lot of covered women and Africans, they're almost all vitamin D deficient, and that's such an important. It's not just a vitamin that helps with your bone health, and it's almost like a hormone. So it helps with immune function, cancer prevention, weight loss, mood. It's incredibly important vitamin, having good levels of vitamin D, and autoimmune disorders and cancer prevention, and having good levels.
Yeah. And this really hit home for me because I've a big fan of yours. You helped me have 2 children well into my 40s.
Yes, and you were very good.
by supporting me to know what I needed to support my own body with. But I found it really interesting because at one stage you asked me to go to a doctor and get blood tests to measure some of these things, and there was pushback.
Yes.
Where they didn't, because you were a naturopath, they well, why is this necessary? I also explained that you were a blood scientist, and they sort of changed their tune a little bit. But do you think that there's still pushback in this day and age, or
I think there's 3 main reactions and what I try and do is give the client a referral with this. I'm seeing this lady. This is why I'm seeing her. This is what I've done. And I'd like these tests, and because, your thyroid functions because she's cold and putting on weight and thinning out a third of the eyebrows, and she's got low body temperatures. I'd like plasma zinc because she's vegetarian. She's got symptoms of, white spots on her nails or whatever. I'd like vitamin D because she's an indoor worker and it's common. or she's had previous vitamin D deficiency. So I sort of give explanations. So there's three main reactions. Some very not so supportive doctors will just rip up and not even read it. Some of them know how I operate and are very, very supportive and refer me clients, and they will gladly do most of the tests. Sometimes what the doctors are fearful of is being audited by, I think it's HIC, of being over requesting tests. And if they're found guilty, and a lot of integrative doctors that do these less known tests are sometimes targeted and have to justify, and if they can't justify why they've ordered the test, they have to pay for those tests out of their own pocket. So but then there's the middle ground doctors that will say, yes, look, I agree with this, and this, but I'm not going to do this and this. You'll have to pay for them privately. And I can write up a request for all of the tests. It's just that I'm trying to save the patient money. But even some integrative doctors, they just get the patients to pay for all the tests that aren't like full blood and liver function and kidney, the normal run-of-the-mill tests. They get them to get them done and pay for them out of their own pocket, just to make it easy. And sometimes clients say to me, look, I just can't be bothered having an argument with my doctor. I know she's not on board. So I will just go with writing up a script, and they just pay the invoice, and then they get a script and just go to their local Dorevitch lab and get their bloods taken. Excellent. And pay for it. And I've just noticed there's a question Charles has asked, what are the indications of vitamin D deficiency? So the real severe long-term vitamin D deficiency is rickets, which is like bendy legs, but it's actually quite a silent condition. But commonly, many people have sore muscles that can be a sign of vitamin D deficiency, and vitamin D and magnesium absorption are quite linked. So you can have symptoms of like magnesium deficiency, cramps and flickering eyelids and stuff, because you need each other to absorb.
Great. So, and then in terms of just say somebody who's trying to lose weight and they are feeling like they don't know where to start, or they've tried all different things. Like, yes. Does genetics affect that, and how can they work with their own bodies?
Yes. Okay. So I actually did a paper where I actually took 20 of my clients, all that wanted to lose weight, and half of them were happy to do a genetic profile and half of them weren't. And I actually did like the success was actually a lot higher with people that actually knew their genetic impacts. And there was one that didn't do it, but she did end up doing the genetics, and then she actually did market improvement once she knew what her genetics are. So how you impact it, so there's like the FTO gene, we'll call it the fatso gene. I've actually written a blog on my website, holistichealth.com.au, and it's why is it so hard to lose weight? So I talk about the 10 things that can impact weight management, genetics being one of them, but others being stress, because that increases cortisol and makes you store fat. Toxins, heavy metals, chemicals, pesticides, those sorts of things can slow down your liver function and make it harder to lose weight. Things like, it's all in the blog, but anyway, so there's 7 other things. Oh yeah, low nutrients like vitamin D, low magnesium, low zinc, iodine, because they can impact your hormones like thyroid function. So I always check thyroid function, and the regular TSH that the doctor normally does as a screen for thyroid is not always 100% accurate, because the reference range is quite broad. Like the TSH is called your thyroid stimulating hormone, and that talks to your thyroid and says, come on, thyroid, make thyroid hormones, T4, which gets converted to T3 and acts on the cells. So as you become more underactive thyroid, your TSH goes up. But the reference range for the lab is 0.5 to say 4 or 5. But once a client's TSH goes up over 2, I start thinking there could be some things going on. So I look at nutrients like iodine, zinc, tyrosine, stress, selenium's a big one. And also check for autoimmune thyroid dysfunction, particularly if there's a family history of autoimmunity, if there's history of celiac, and because that can start way before the TSH gets impacted. So I do tests a little bit more than what the GP is sort of allowed to do, really. And unless there's a good reason, that's the time for the patient to do the private testing. Anyway, so to answer your questions about genes, yes. So what it is, it's like when you've got the FTO gene, which I call it the fatso gene, and you've got two copies, and
Sorry, you call it the fatso gene.
I call it the fatso gene because it's so FTO, and it's not very complimentary. But I did have a lady.
No, just on that. So,
yes.
Do some people just have that gene, and other people don't have the gene?
Yes. Then
oh my God, it's answered all my questions.
Exactly, because it's like, oh, it's not my fault, it's my genes. And but I will tell you, when I see people and they have the FTO gene, so if you've got one copy from one parent, it's called, like needing support. And if you've got two copies, you need more support, or it's got an orange light or a red light. Red light means you've got two copies of the gene from each parent. It means that you
stuffed if you've got a copy.
Well, no, it's fantastic. It's fantastic during times of famine. So if there's like a worldwide disaster and there's food shortages, the people with the FTO gene are the ones that are going to survive. So it's a survival of the fittest thing. It's just that we don't have many famines during in our lifestyle, certainly in first world countries. But I say I try and put the positives of it, but they're very, very energy efficient. So it means that they don't need to eat a lot to maintain their metabolism. However, having said that, I had a woman who was probably 50 who came in, and she wasn't skinny, but she was just nice body shape. And I looked at her and looked at her genes. I looked at her genes. I said, you've got two copies. You've got a red dot on your FTO gene, which means I said, what were you like as a teenager? I said, I can't believe you look like this. And she said, ever since I was a teenager, I always knew that I had to be very careful with my exercise and eat very carefully. Right from my friends would go to McDonald's and I would have, a one chip and a piece of hamburger without the bread. She was very, very careful all her life, and she never expressed that gene. Just because you've got the genetics doesn't mean that you express the gene. So we'll call it the genetics.
Can you just say that? When you say it doesn't mean, firstly, it's just making a bit of noise from your microphone. So just make sure you're not touching it. That's all right. So what do you mean she might not express the gene? What does that mean?
Okay, that's a very good question, because just because you have that genetic predisposition doesn't mean you have to express that tendency. So say, for example, we'll say the FTO gene. If you do all the right things, you keep your calories probably a lot less, you don't have too much fat, you exercise, and you look at all the other drivers that can increase weight loss, like stress and hormones and nutrients and stuff. The genetics is the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. So you may never be fat. You might have the FTO 2 copies and never be fat. You might have 2 copies of the MTHFR gene, which a lot's been talked about, the mother gene, I won't swear. But if you've got 2 copies of that gene, you're more likely to have stroke, dementias, cancer, miscarriages.
What's that one
called? It's called the MTHFR gene. There's MTHFR 1 and 2, but it's a C677 gene. And if you've got that, it's if I have that with my fertility clients, I'm very careful to nurture them through their first trimester, at least with extra nutrients like activated folate, not just Elevit. Elevit's probably not so well tolerated because they're only converting about 30% of their folic acid from their diet. But so, for example, I had a grandmother who had 5 children. She had 1 miscarriage and she had the MTHFR, and she was Italian. So she'd eaten lots of leafy greens, lots of vegetables her whole life, and only had 1 miscarriage and never took supplements. But she did it through her diet. She grew up in Italy when there was a lot of homegrown stuff. So she, like nowadays, we rely more on supplements, certainly with pregnancy and preconception, but there's supplements that have folic acid, but now in Australia we can get activated folate like folinic acid and MTHFR, which means that if you have that genetic, we'll call it defect or genetic predisposition, those supplements are bypassing what that gene is stopping the production of. So you're actually bypassing that gene. So, yeah, so there you go.
It's not a death sentence. I love that quote. Jel, could you put up on the screen for us? So what is it? Genetics is the gun, but lifestyle.
Your genetics is the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. And it's like Winston Churchill. He must have had a very good genetics, because he smoked, he drank like a fish, and he lived and he was overweight, but he lived till quite a long age. But whereas someone might do those exact same things but have less favorable genetics and drop dead, 50 of a heart attack or 40 because they had a lot of inflammatory genes, or they had the MTHFR and ate crappy food, or was super stressed, or had a lot of toxins and chemicals. So there's genes that impact oxidative stress. That's another one that you don't know of. If I go back, and I've written a book, I've written a blog about weight loss doctors, but I've written another one, the 5 pillars of health. That basically, if you look at those 5 pillars, you're sort of 90% of the way to optimizing your genetic potential and everything. But
just on that, so
yes.
what I'm hearing, just to get the some themes out here, it's really like most genetics you can work with.
Absolutely. Yes. It's not like the BRCA gene that you've got this 50% chance of having a gene that doesn't know how to switch off the abnormals, the breast or ovarian cancer cells. So it's not like testing for BRCA genes. It's testing for genes that, for example, liver detox that doesn't clear your estrogen very effectively, or genes that make you more prone to not clearing free radicals and toxins very effectively, or genes that don't process your vitamin D effectively, or increase your risk of inflammation if you don't, have a healthy diet. And so, yeah.
So I just want to show this so everyone can see. So I've just got my DNA kit here from Doreen that I'm about to do. So there's some things that I intrinsically know, like I feel like I am intolerant to dairy. I feel like I don't process vitamin D very well. I'm often deficient. So I'm going to take this. So Doreen, do you want to share? So, this sort of takes the guesswork out of it, doesn't it?
Exactly. It helps personalize a wellness program for somebody, because what I never call them weaknesses or defects or anything like that. I say that they're your nurture points. So say your nurture points would be vitamin D metabolism or inflammation. And then we work with nutrients and supplements and lifestyle considerations. So certain probiotics can help upregulate or make some anti-inflammatory genes work better. Some nutrients like spinach and beetroot can upregulate or make the genes that help your blood pressure work better. There's nutrients like broccoli, cauliflower, all that cruciferous vegetables, kale, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts that make your liver detox pathways work better. So, you can actually have a very personalized program that based around your genetics and the pathology tests that I get in conjunction and the tests that I do in the clinic, like the bioimpedance test and the live blood and stuff, we can get a picture to work out how to personalize your health program.
Okay, great. And the other question I've got is a bit of a personal one. So I've got 2 children, 10 and 13, and I feel like sometimes that's the only bad mother moments I have. I'm pretty happy with my mothering, but I feel like I'm not feeding them well enough. Like I'm not considering their physical health. I consider a lot about their mental health, but maybe not their physical health as much. So what can I do? Because, kids are often like, oh, I don't want that, or, it's quite hard to get them eating vegetables every day. And I take ownership of that. It's me that's creating that. But what tips would you get to support me to support my children?
Okay. That's a good question, and I'm sure a lot of parents would be very interested in learning about. So number one is lead by example. So I was speaking to my son yesterday, who's 25, and he's in a camper van traveling around Australia, and he always has vegetables or salads and fruit. Like, he's just paranoid almost. I mean, some people call me obsessive. Even when we were kids. When the kids were young and we'd have fish and chips, I would have steamed veggies on the side or a salad, and I'd make them, if you want more chips, you have to eat the salad. So number one is lead by example. Just whatever you eat and put in your mouth, make sure it's always healthy and lots of vegetables. Secondly, I think there's a lot of educational programs at school that are educating kids about the vegetables and the benefits of fruit, and basically just making sure that you don't have to like it. You don't have to like everything you eat. I don't like swede, but I used to eat it. But you have to eat some of it, or just eat this small. If they don't like broccoli, just make sure you have a small bit of broccoli. Broccoli is good for heaps of reasons. You just eat that small piece of broccoli. That's all I ask you. Or you can choose, or get them to help prepare food. That's the third thing. So one, lead by example. Two, just keep presenting the foods. They say after 10 times of presenting foods that they'll eventually succumb. And I know my son was a really stubborn eater, but he went on a trip to Japan for, I think it was 6 weeks or something, living in a family and going to school in this small village. And he made his mind. It was a very emotional, mental, intellectual thing. I'm going to eat whatever they feed me. And because he didn't eat tofu, he didn't eat fish, and he ended up really enjoying these foods because he was in that mental state. So maybe just work on the mindset. You might not like it, but it's good for you. When you get invited to friends' places and stuff, we used to have kids come over when the kids were younger, and they would never have had a radish. I would, as a snack when they got home, they'd be a bunch of fresh peas that the kids would have to pod. They'd love podding the peas, and they'd fight over the podded peas. They'd have radishes, alfalfa sprouts, cut up carrot sticks, and my kids were just so used to it. The friends would just think that they were weird, but they would eat the carrot. They'd try the radishes and stuff. Now there was a Hashimoto's question there, and it's gone. But when it comes up, here we go. Hashimoto's, celiac reflux. Cassie, you okay if I answer this? And suspected Cushing's with ACTH and cortisol. Yes. I made peace with a very quick weight gain and very good hugger. All right. Now, I can't see the rest of it, but basically what I would do with you, Cassie, is just go right with the basics. And Cushing's is a tricky one, and celiac, when you're celiac, there's often other issues, not just gluten. Sometimes dairy is an issue. So I'd be doing thorough food sensitivity testing, but absolutely working on your gut, because that's a key to most of your health issues. Yes. Anyway, so I got sidetracked there, Maureen, but does that give you some ideas for helping your kids with foods?
Yeah, and Cassie's just said yes, a smiley face. So
yes, thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think even from Cassie, the way Cassie wrote the question, she's someone who's taking responsibility for it. So that's something that's come out today as well. Instead of just going, well, yes, genetics may affect your health, but what's your parting words around, getting support and taking action for yourself as well?
Well, just before I take those last parting words, there is always an emotional component. Well, I feel there's a big chunk of emotional component behind any health issue, whether it's asthma, cancer. Look at the emotions. There's lots of books written on particular conditions and what the emotion is behind the health condition. But I think if I was to give a parting message, just read that blog about the 5 pillars of health, and make sure you're having good sleep, good exercise, good diet, and manage stress, and have a healthy gut. And that's sort of the main drivers of any health issues. If you've got all those basic things covered, the rest of the 20% is just icing on the cake to get the rest of your health. But it's very hard. Not many people can manage stress and have good sleep and eat well and exercise, because it's, you know, we're all so busy. So it's a matter of prioritizing and putting yourself first, because if you don't look after yourself, if you're an adult, I'm assuming kids don't have that reaction, but if you're an adult, no one else is going to look after you.
Yeah, and it's a bit sad when we just leave it to the health professionals when it's, you know, sometimes a bit late.
Yeah, well, with my fertility support, it's empowering the person to take control and as much as they can, and that impacts their health. I mean, you don't know what injections you're getting and medications, or what when you have to do IVF or something, but the rest of it you can be empowered, or if you do it naturally and give it a shot, it's being empowered and informed and working on the basics of your own health, and that's hard to put those jigsaw pieces into place sometimes. But you know, when you have a good person that can guide and coach you through those things, that in a stepwise, it's like eating an elephant. You know, you just do it one bite at a time, and eat the frogs the frogs first.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay, great. So thanks for all the tips today. So if people want to look at the DNA, you can do it through Doreen. She'll send you the test, or you can visit her out of lockdown, and then get your results, and then she can go through everything and work out a plan for you, which I've done on previous occasions as well. It's been really great working out plans. And anything else you'd like to share?
Now, if any of your listeners would like to take advantage of a 15-minute complimentary chat just to see how I can help their health issue, or I might even be able to refer them to someone who can. I do Zoom and online consults now. We've been pivoting for COVID, but I also work on face-to-face in Melbourne, and soon to be Sydney next year.
Awesome. Thanks, Maureen. Can't recommend her highly enough. She's helped me with a lot of health stuff in the past, and as I said, helped me. Had 2 babies well into my 40s, and I felt amazing through the whole process. It was very stress free, and I felt empowered to take control of my own health. So thanks, Doreen. You've been amazing.
Thank you. That's very kind words. Thank you, Maureen. Appreciate that. Take care.
See you later, everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
So if you'd like to see more interviews with amazing business owners sharing extraordinary insights, click subscribe, then click the bell button, then click all, and we'll notify you.